Welcome to In the Lab, a podcast from Luminate, the leading provider of data and insights for the entertainment industry. I'm Andrew Wallenstein, Chief Media Analyst with Luminate Intelligence. My guest is Mack Sovereign, Chief Content Officer of Wave Sports and Entertainment, a really interesting company that for the past 10 years has been sort of blazing the path on social media for digital native content, often featuring some very familiar figures from the sports world, also branching out beyond that, beyond the sports world. And Mack, thanks for coming in. Let's talk about your business.
Excited to talk about it. Thanks for having me.
So I want to start at a pretty high level, though, because at Luminate, what we've noticed is when we look at unscripted production levels, we have noticed dramatic declines in so many different genres, except for one, sports, which I think has been multiple years into a renaissance in terms of what we call sports shoulder content. Content that's not the game, but is supportive of the game. And you guys are real specialists in that regard. And so I wanted to get your take to start in terms of like, why is it that we are seeing what I think has been a very strong surge now going back 5-6 years in content that wasn't that popular prior to that?
Yeah, that's interesting. I think one factor could be that as maybe culture gets a little more fractured or everyone can go find their niche somewhere or watch on demand whenever they want, sports is still that thing that is a communal event and still drives a lot of intrigue, even if you're not that into the game. The aspect of getting together with your friends or sharing something in a moment maybe is creating further sports fandom when people are kind of starved for that. Two, I just think with distribution being so readily available to anyone who can create or, whatever their thing might be, reach fans, distributed online, it creates more avenues for people to find something that intrigues them, whether that's hardcore analysis about, the Philadelphia Eagles and their defensive scheme or something at a much higher level where it's a light connection to sports, but it's really more of a lifestyle and a hangout with people you like and maybe they're chatting about the game. There's just a lot of ways, I guess, for people to appreciate sports content and find it in various places.
So then let's talk about the Wave way, because as I mentioned, you guys were really pioneers in terms of looking to platforms like YouTube or IG or TikTok and figuring out how to make content work there. And you've done it with some really interesting names, starting in the sports world, everything from Dude Perfect to Kylie Kelsey. You used to work with the Kelsey brothers as well. So what is it about those platforms that you think is conducive to this trend of sports shoulder content?
Yeah, probably starts with the low barrier to entry for creation. Great talent and some folks behind the scenes who can put a good show together and you can get it out in the world. But two would be the discoverability. Folks, whether you're Kylie Kelsey or not, not as well known, you still have an outlet. And there are, like I said, so many flavors of programming, whether it's in sports or any other corner of the world. And because of, I guess, the algorithms being very good at what they do, you're going to find something that you like, something that's within your niche and maybe allows for more people to have a seat at the table. And that's been certainly the case for us as we've kind of broadened our reach from what started with Jason and Travis and Paul George, Carmelo Anthony, to now kind of, further reaches from sports or culture more broadly, comedy, music, entertainers of other lanes.
And I want to get to talking about the branching out beyond sports, but starting first just within sports, what makes for a good partner in terms of an athlete, putting them in front of the camera? We've all sports fans seen that certain athletes are not built for that.
Right.
So how do you decide who is?
Yeah. It's very important nowadays. I say that because it was a lot of asking people to participate 5, 6, 7, 8 years ago. Athletes inherently hesitant to share because of the team first mentality and don't want to be the person who's talking outside the locker room, all that kind of stuff. But now with the success of these shows, both financially and in terms of, what it can do for someone building affinity with fans and building an audience outside of the game, there's a lot more interest in it. So I think it puts the onus more on us to be, like you said, vetting appropriately to find folks who have the right spark interests off the court, things that they can talk about week in and week out. And probably the biggest thing that we try to get to the bottom of is that desire, like the want to. Are you doing this because someone in your life, a manager, a friend said, hey, I was looking at the news and the Kelce's signed a really big podcast deal. Like maybe you could make some money on that.
Right.
That's probably not the right long-term approach to like showing up every week when you have a very important, visible day job. Who are they going to be when they're on a 3-game losing streak is kind of the question.
Sure.
To understand the long-term value and the desire to make this a part of the schedule.
Well, so I get now what makes for the right athlete. What I'm curious is when you get the right athlete, how to make sure you're making it the right business, not just for them, but for Wave as well. Mm-hmm. I would, for instance, assume that brands must love this kind of content, and Madison Avenue, I would assume you've got some pretty strong ties there.
Certainly, yeah. I think with sports being, like you said at the beginning, just a growing outlet and, such a retaining, or if not growing, its popularity, the fact that we're opening up new avenues for brands, advertisers to connect with the people at the center of these games is obviously it's great for Wave and it's great for these advertisers as well. Something that we work really hard at, or has been a big part of our success on the Wave front, at least from monetization, is, we call them podcasts, but we're really a video first company. And we were investing in social video in 2017, 2018, and that positioned us very well in 21, 22, when it became the expectation that podcasts would be video first, if not consumed more on video than they are on audio. We already had all that infrastructure to produce a great video version, to distribute it well on YouTube, and then to market the heck out of it on Instagram and TikTok and all the relevant platforms. But to connect it back to the advertiser, part of our success, like I said, has been building cross-platform packages that actually create value for the advertiser, where they're not just getting a mid-roll ad read within the audio version, but it's showing up on YouTube, their logos, distributed on the video. And then with the, hundreds of millions of impressions we can drive on social, where you also provide some additional reach there. And so that is great value ultimately when we can deliver across those 3 places in combination with an athlete that folks have a strong connection with.
And I would imagine that being a first mover on social video gave you a lot of knowledge about putting the right kinds of videos out there in social that could go viral, get attention. Maybe you see a clip on TikTok, but then you are dragged over to Spotify when you want to see the full episode. Is that sort of the arc?
100%. We were lucky to be able to spend kind of 3 years in a very small office with 8 of us, just kind of learning the social feeds and finding a lot of other, oftentimes pretty young people who are native to Instagram and TikTok and building fan communities of their own, Steph Curry fan pages with, hundreds of thousands of followers. And that wasn't just because Steph Curry is amazing at basketball. It's because these guys, or this girl in particular, had an edge for packaging, distributing, creating content in a way that was standing above the rest. And so we were fortunate to find and hire a lot of those people, and then, kind of build a playbook internally where, we take a lot of pride in knowing the ins and outs and the little things that make a big difference when you're trying to compete on social.
Fast forward, Wave has been around now almost a decade. How big is the company? I assume it's more than 8.
It is. We're probably like 115 maybe full-time now, over 100. We started in San Francisco. After a couple of years, moved to LA because we really realized we're a media company, not a tech company. But now we have most of our sales team in New York, so growing all over the place.
Now, there's also a whole other element of your business besides just sort of pairing with athletes, which is kind of partnering with leagues who are trying to understand how best to engage audiences on these digital platforms you know
Right.
so well. So tell me a bit about how that part of your business works.
Yeah, we call it the Wave Media Agency. It is built on that foundation that I just talked about, of this expertise and this know-how of distributing and creating for social. So there we work with leagues, rights holders, and brands, consumer brands as well, who are trying to reach a digital audience and don't want to necessarily build that function entirely in-house or go through the headaches of having to learn and hire and train and do all that themselves. They can tap into Wave's established expertise and our audiences to kind of give them a jump start and program those channels in a really effective way. To give you an example, we've been partners with CONCACAF.
And you might want to explain what CONCACAF is for those who don't know.
Yeah, CONCACAF is the soccer federation for North and Central America. So the organizing body in the same way UEFA is in Europe. They work with us. We program their TikTok. We cover their live events, bring our talent or other influencers that we have relationships with to kind of program the social side of these games, connect with the players, which we do very well. Create all this shoulder programming, really trying to make a consistent output that creates fans in between the tournaments. So when tournament time comes, fans have some familiarity with the storylines, the players, the leagues.
Sure.
And that's representative of what we do on that side of the business. We also work a lot with the archival content, years and years of amazing footage sitting, on the shelf somewhere. And so our producers, editors can get their hands on that and create, whether that's story-driven, 3-minute videos or best of compilations, all that kind of stuff that tends to do very well on Facebook, Instagram, everywhere else.
Well, let me be blunt, though. Why can't the leagues do this themselves? They're the ones sitting on the content. What do they need the Wave for?
Yeah. Well, certainly they do it themselves. And, CONCACAF has a great team in-house, programming, across their owned and operated channels in addition to the support we provide on some of those. But Wave comes in a couple places. One, we have our own soccer brand, FTBL, that has maybe 20 million followers across Instagram and TikTok, right? So that can also be a distribution engine, in conjunction to programming their channels. That is helpful fuel on the fire. And then Wave has a lot of experience very cheaply, very quickly, spinning up, original content, quote unquote, for social platforms. That it's not big 6-camera shoots, right? That's cell phone shot. But we're really good at that. We have great relationships with talent who can come in and make an impact. And we can produce that stuff efficiently and at scale. And then, like I said, distribute on our own channels, and it creates a great flywheel for partners.
And I would imagine that content is dramatically different than some of the stuff you might see, say, unscripted long form. Yes, both feature athletes, but that's probably where the comparison ends.
Yeah, I guess it does. A lot of trial and error of learning, what works. The talent's a huge piece of it. There's a lot of voices online now, so finding the right folks and investing in them with someone who can efface a personality, approach, a tone that is going to get people to stop scrolling. But yeah, being really mindful in the edit as well. When those first 3 seconds are kind of everything, so that goes a long way.
Yeah, and that tells you everything you need to know about the mentality of difference in terms of programming for digital versus traditional. But I'm also curious when you say, trying to figure out what works. I think maybe the challenge of digital platforms is what works constantly changes.
Right.
And it's not necessarily in the platform's control as to what works or what doesn't. It's really fan-driven.
Yeah, that's right. Keeps us on our toes. It's part of the fun, though. Being on these kind of quickly changing platforms. I think the biggest challenge, and it's a positive one because it makes us better, is less so many changes on the platform side, but it's the competition on the platform. People all over the world, from leagues and teams and broadcasters who staff great teams now at this, and socially native content producers, to, like I said, people in their bedrooms in their hometown. It's really competitive, and the algorithm's going to reward those people who are figuring out an edge, how to get clicks, not just get clicks, but retain that audience. The watch time, is so critical to getting more and more views, which is great because that incentivizes good content and not just clickbait content.
Okay. And, I think looking at your business, particularly on the podcast side, you might conclude okay, it's insert athlete X to sit in an environment like this and have a conversation. But my guess is there's more to it. For instance, I would imagine some programming involves aligning with live events and working off of that. Not necessarily you don't have the rights to the game, but you kind of work alongside the game.
That's right. a lot. The CONCACAF example I referenced, it's certainly a lot of that, and other partners who, want us to come and cover it from a social side to create the intrigue and the awareness.
Right. But it's probably a whole different set of challenges when you're doing that kind of content as opposed to this.
Yeah. The similarities, still got to be nimble, quick edit, turnaround, shooting and editing on your phone, and doing it on the fly. That's not too dissimilar than the pace that we operate, even creating some of, our podcasts and some of the longer form stuff. So there's some crossover there.
So sports is going to keep you busy, but as you indicated, it's not all about sports nowadays. You recently launched a show with the rapper Kid Cudi, for instance, and I'm sure you've got other entertainers. So start with the why. Why branch?
Yeah. One, our playbook is not specific to sports. That was the area we started probably first and foremost because Brian, Vern, myself, other people who got the company started are massive sports fans, so that was just an area of personal passion for us. So like I said, finding great talent, putting the infrastructure to produce, distribute, monetize, that's not specific to sports. The area that I think is really interesting is we branch into comedy and music. You mentioned Kid Cudi. We recently started partnerships with Caleb Heron, his So True podcast, Andrew Santino in the comedy space as well. They producing, or what they do, talking, creating fans comes very naturally and very well practiced to them. So honestly, there's not much of a burden on us there to produce, if at all, especially if they have an established show where we can just come in a sales partnership or help amplify some of their content on social media. That is a very turnkey type of partnership for us, which is wonderful. And two, I think, having partners where their primary business is aligned with what Wave can do in terms of creating fandom is something that's very appealing to us long term. By that I mean comedians, musicians, folks who are selling tickets or creating streams, for their music, right? Working with Wave to develop hit digital IP, whether that's a talk show or something else, is inherently valuable to the rest of their business as well. It creates some great aligned incentives to, be creative, create a lot of awesome things, and think about unique ways to kind of grow their platform.
And so, the sports world has plenty of people. Entertainment's even bigger. Mm-hmm. I'm just curious how the sort of flow of interested parties that may want to work with Wave, how do they come to know you?
Well, I think this, fortunate now to have a lot of hit shows out there that carry our mark, and word of mouth always goes a long way. People recommending Wave as partners as someone who's very white glove in terms of the support we provide people who are already incredibly busy. That reputation amongst the talent representation side and just the talent themselves has helped us a lot. We take a lot of pride in being, like I said, that really white glove type of partner. That goes a long way for us. Otherwise, it's continuing to build great relationships, around town and in Century City to make sure we're top of people's minds and they understand why we think we're the best at what we do in terms of building and distributing talk shows.
Is there a particular program that has been the calling card for you? Perhaps one singular hit that stands head above shoulders?
Certainly New Heights with Jason and Travis Kelce. That put us on the map. It was our first podcast. We were very fortunate. Those guys, incredible.
Say
right?
no more, yeah.
Didn't take them very long. Household name.
But maybe not household names when you started with them.
Sure, I mean, Trav, a lot of Super Bowl success. Jason as well. I think maybe people didn't know just how infectious and engaging their personalities are, or hadn't seen it in the way that New Heights allowed them to put it on display. New Heights was really the one that put us on the map, went a long ways.
And I just wonder also, because when you're dealing with athletes often, these are people who are really able to sort of control their own destiny on and off the court, not used to people being perhaps in a coach position to say, well, don't do that.
Yeah.
Are you guys, you personally maybe, have to be in that position where it's like, hey, athlete X, you're on my court now, and let me tell you how to do this, when they may not necessarily be open to that?
Right. Well, I think that they're used to being coached, inherently coachable people, and have had, to go through that and earn their spots and go through all the, they weren't always 9-time NBA All-Stars, right? They times had to earn their spot. So I think the ability to listen and desire to learn and get better comes pretty naturally to them. So oftentimes very open to the feedback from our producers and helping shape them into more and more engaging podcasters. Surprisingly open to that. And maybe not surprising, like I said, because they're used to being coached.
Well, I guess to some degree it's a matter of chemistry. You're going to size up talent in terms of their ability, not just their talent, but their ability to work with you, take direction, be open to criticism. And yeah, maybe some athletes are more inclined for that than others.
Yeah. I mean, very competitive people. They always want to be the best, at what they're doing. So they apply that in the craft of podcasting as well.
And I'm sure Wave applies that craft as well to the competitive set that it is in.
Mm-hmm.
There are obviously other companies out there, but I guess I just want to get your sense, and I'm sure you're not going to name names, but like, is it brutal out there? Is there a lot of competition? People vying to partner with athletes and the like?
Yes, I think it's gotten probably more competitive as the business of podcasting has grown. More people thinking they can do it, want to take their chance at it. I mean, even just looking at the legacy networks who didn't really have much of podcasting 5 years ago, or if they did, maybe more of an afterthought for some great on-air talent they might have, investing in that more. So yes, it's competitive. That's great for talent. Makes the deal-making process more competitive. But on the Wave front, we're pretty proud of what we've built, the ability to maximize the value of people's time, both in terms of creating a hit show with the hour or two we get them a week when they only have so much time to go around, but also maximizing their time in the sense of our sales team is the best in the business, creating really thoughtful, valuable packages for advertisers to connect with our talent, and then, like I said, distribute them across social, audio, video platforms. All of that has made us pretty competitive in the deal-making process. So,
one last question. As you look at the future of the business of podcasting,
mm-hmm.
How does that make you feel? I mean, this is a very dynamic space that 2 or 3 years ago we weren't even talking about video. It was a strictly audio product. So it's very dynamic. Monetization challenges, I think, are still there even as it grows and scales. So how are you feeling about it?
Really excited. Very good. I think, everyone always hears this idea that everyone has a podcast. And I mean, that's not entirely true, but maybe the general idea is true of podcasts are booming and everyone's launching one.
But discovery is a challenge. And I think what we've also seen from the podcast business is it's sort of like there's the A-listers and then there's everybody else.
Yeah. We're fortunate to work with a lot of A-listers and have a very high bar for talent and strike those partnerships that we think can help us continue to launch the shows that stand out. The fact that everyone has a podcast, I think, tells you that there's an insatiable, increasing demand for this type of programming. And then even seeing the platforms and the streamers investing in, these quote-unquote podcasts, really the kind of modern talk show, is very representative of, everything kind of heading in the right direction for continuing to invest in what previously was thought of as digital programming or podcasting.
So on that note, when you see a Netflix now really pretty going in aggressively on the podcasting front, I assume that's good for your business, and do you think that means that where Netflix goes, we're going to see other streamers follow? We may already be.
Yeah, I think you'll definitely continue to see other streamers and platforms invest in. I don't know as much of whether that would be launching and producing and creating something from scratch so much as just licensing 24-hour windows for exclusivity of the video on their platform before it goes to YouTube. I think you'll definitely see more of that, given Netflix leading the charge there. But it'll be interesting to see how the next 2 years go in that front, once the streamers have some data on how it's performing on their platforms.
Well, I'm interested in following how you and Wave do over the next few years. Thank you for coming in and telling us about your business.
Absolutely. I really appreciate you having me. Thank you.